Namaskar and welcome to DGI episode 194 with Sree and Sree. One of the sponsors of this program is Cowcoin USA, a digital currency that is directed towards addressing healthcare, education, and entertainment sectors. We have a lot to cover and we start with global news. Here we go. Sridharji, Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar, good morning to everybody, and looking forward as we complete 6 months of 2021 and move into the second half of 2021. We expect better and more organized life as we step into what I call as the post-COVID-2 era, at least in parts of the world.
And in global news, Putin says that the time will come to announce his possible successor, but this is not the time for that. And President Putin goes on to say that there was a US plane involved in reconnaissance mission working closely with the British destroyer in Black Sea. Viewers, if you remember, we had mentioned this in one of our previous episodes. Sridharji, what do you make of the situation? So this is like a joint exercise between NATO and the United States?
It looks like the first incident that occurred was the British destroyer, making its way. We also announced the documents pertaining to that destroyer was available in a bus stop, which was picked up along with the other defense documents. We covered that part. Now, Mr. Putin has come forward and stated that, hey, US, you are part of this because you had a reconnaissance plane participating with it. And so closely monitoring. It's not that we were not aware, we are extremely aware. And we have given you the warnings as to next time we'll give you a warning and then there will be missiles and bombs coming at you if you are trespassing our territory. So clearly I think Vladimir Putin is increasing his rhetoric to say you are unnecessarily stepping into my waters. Now to add further fuel to the fury, we will report this probably on Monday once these exercises are complete. NATO is now doing, along with United States, about 30 nations are participating in the exercise called Sea Breeze, plus some drilling on Black Sea to further infuriate President Putin.
And as China celebrates its 100th year of CCP founding, the COVID-19, human rights, trade violations, border disputes, debt diplomacy dominate global attention. Yet, one significant area that is often overlooked under Xi Jinping since 2012 is his focus to control international organizations. This, though he has had limited success, as we all know, that many global organizations are in his pocket. Anti-CCP sentiments hits a new high amid upcoming presidential campaign in South Korea. So we have lots of things going on in and around China. They are celebrating their 100 years. Sridharji, what do you make of this? Do you think this hegemony is going to continue, that Xi Jinping will be able to be the premier till the end of his life?
Well, first and foremost, I think commemorating, which is today, July 1st, which is end of day in Asia, he kicked off his address to the Chinese audiences, probably to the world audiences from Tiananmen Square, which in itself is a ceremonial point to make his comments and statement to the world. He basically has, the key headline is socialism and Marxism, the model that has helped in the past 100 years, the development of CCP and the PLA, and China as a country has worked. No other model is relevant to China. This is the model that works, and much to the celebrations and the clapping of the 70,000 people which were present in the Tiananmen Square. So he went on to orchestrate how China has become great institutions, how it's a superpower now, and very soon it will dominate the world. All the rhetoric or all the facts, they are facts. I mean, China is number one, number two in the nominal GDP, number one in on the PPP basis. When you look at various stats and figures, it's the largest manufacturer in the world. It's the country with the largest reserves. It's the country which has consistently maintained higher GDP growth relative to many countries in the world. So when you look at all those facets, it's got a phenomenal navy. It has got the largest number of people deployed in its armed forces, etc. So there's much to kind of celebrate from the point of view what they have accomplished. But then equally, it is tempered with their behavior as to what they have evolved themselves as, with the power being entrusted to them, both economically, from a security point of view. And all those points that you mentioned highlights the challenges that the world is confronted with on a number of fronts. Okay, and also he's trying to control the narrative through WHO, Human Rights Organization, International Telecommunication Union, the international, the airlines. So where there is various ways by which he is trying to, though he has had relatively modest success, his footprint into the academic institutions to shape the academic narrative, his footprint into the research institutions to integrate and inculcate the thought process and integration of the research into the Chinese thinking. I mean, Wuhan is a classic example, is a reflection of some of the issues, the hegemony that China has created. Will he continue? It is a 50-50. If I have to bet my dollars, notwithstanding coup attempts and so on, I think he will probably continue. He may not continue for life. He probably will continue for another 4 years. But there is clearly growing concerns at Xi Jinping style of leadership and what it is unleashing to people of China.
And Myanmar military wants foreign media to not call it as junta. European troops make low-key return home from Afghanistan as troop withdrawals draw closer. Most EU troops have left, leaving the final US troops to complete the pullout. US is just days away from doing so. Your thoughts on this? After the US leave, will it be like free season for Taliban to just rush in and fill the vacuum? What are your thoughts, sir?
So already open sesame has been, called thrice. So the door has partly opened. Now it will be, complete, and then they will get the Aladdin and magic lamp. So sure, soon the genie will come out, and we will begin to see the consequences of this. There's no other solution. Which is namely, you are not going to have, 100% permanently troops stationed in Afghanistan. This is notwithstanding the fact, more than 20 years have passed, and still we have no visible sign of security in Afghanistan. Is a telling reflection of the challenges that the region faces. But this abrupt withdrawal, EU has more or less cleared, and it looks like the almost US is way ahead of its schedule of September 11th or 9/11, and they are also drenching themselves out of Afghanistan. So what looms is potential consequences coming out of it. So therefore, whether there be a civil war, we'll see. But I think my view is that there will be a very quick and rapid takeover by Taliban.
Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid and UAE Minister of Foreign Affairs Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan signed an economic trade agreement, and also Israel opened its first embassy in Dubai. This becomes much more traditional now, like any country to country. Israel and UAE are now just like normal countries doing transactions between each other. Tigray rebels seize more control of territory, including in the capital region, as they broke the ceasefire and fighting resumed. Sir, Israel, I think the foreign policy has undergone little change, even though the government has changed, and looks like they are continuing to grow strong ties with the United Arab Emirates.
They have a very strong ties. That was one of the first relationships that was established as part of the West Asian Peace Accord that was struck by Trump and the West Asian leadership. It's remarkable foreign policy success of any U.S. president within the context of what was accomplished once acrimonial today, and once acrimonial and adversaries today have become partners in business and partners in transacting between establishing people-to-people contacts. So I think it's a very positive step. Recall that we had also covered in Daily Global Insights the trilateral partnership that was developed with Dubai as a logistical hub between India, UAE, and Israel, targeted business of about $110 billion over the next 3 to 5 years. So it all augurs well in terms of normalization and the normalization of relationship and the continuation of the foreign policy, as you rightly pointed out, from the previous Benjamin Netanyahu regime transitioning into Naftali Bennett phase.
And in US news, former Defense Secretary Dick Rumsfeld has died at the age of 88. Trump visits US Mexico border and claims that Democrats are running a disinformation campaign. The real question is, do they really want open borders, or are they just plain incompetent? President asks. Biden has failed America, and House Republicans blame Joe Biden for the border crisis after inspection with President Trump. Joe purposefully undid successful Trump policies, they claim. So these are House GOP representatives, aren't they, sir?
Correct. The House GOP representatives with people like Jim Jordan and then of course Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, was there with President Trump. There was a town hall yesterday hosted by Sean Hannity with Abbott and President Trump. It's a very different visit to the visit that was done by Vice President Kamala Harris. Clearly, firsthand, they saw people surging through the border into United States, and also some of the people, questioned, commenting that it is just reflective of the pro-surge policy, which is one of the reasons why that has encouraged them to go through the hardships and make the journey. And there has been incidents of casualties as because of the hot temperatures. All this was witnessed firsthand, contrary to the ceremonial thing that happened. So which prompted Trump and the House representatives to make the observation, what exactly is the rationale behind this border surge? What exactly is the rationale behind reversing stay in Mexico policy? What exactly is the rationale behind stopping the border construction? What exactly is the rationale behind, some of the what you call as the deportation policies, etc., etc. And what exactly is the reason why ICE has been what you call their focus has been shifted. They've all been sent out of the border and more focus around other types of enforcement issues within the state. So all these questions for which there's no answers, but it's again a political statement from the opposite side, but reflecting the reality in the border.
Private donor funds South Dakota National Guard deployment to border, according to South Dakota Governor's Office. Arkansas becomes the latest state to send troops to southern border amid border surge. Department of Homeland Security Secretary goes on to delay the deportation rules. This is the second deadline missed, and effectively the country has no policy to govern its borders. Deliberate or incompetent, you decide, viewers. We just explained to you everything. Let's move on. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf vetoes the GOP-backed election integrity bill, and Arizona Attorney General backs Georgia in their fight against DOJ over election integrity reforms, and Wisconsin Supreme Court rejects a lawsuit to ban absentee ballot drop boxes. Look together, every state is trying to pass its own reforms in voting reforms and so on and so forth. But again, this kind of begs the question, should there not be a uniform system throughout the country? This is just my thoughts, sir. What are your thoughts on this?
A uniform system of national voting system and national voting policies is an imperative that every nation must have. But when you have no consensus between there's only two parties here. There's not, 350 parties, unlike, a dysfunctional democracy like in India or many dysfunctional democracies that exist around the world. There's only two parties. But the two parties seems to be so far apart, it looks like they are more dysfunctional than most other democratic nations. So you have completely opposite principles and philosophies there is no what you call as a consensus centrist group. All we have is two extremes. One which is a state mandate, one which is a national mandate, which has set of rules which contradicts with some of the constitutional elements. So therefore, to get to a national voting system and national voting process and national enforcement of the conduct of the elections is a very difficult expedition for US to embark on. For example, the rules that are being enacted by the House right now gives unilateral control to anybody. You can be a tourist who can come in and basically vote. You just happen to be here at that point of time, or you have happened to have stayed, etc. So you have two extreme views. Hence, it's making the consensus towards a common goal a very difficult path to converge.
House votes to appoint select committee to probe Jan 6 Capitol riots, pretty much along party lines. Kevin McCarthy will be consulted to nominate 5 out of the 13, with the veto resting with the House Speaker. And now let us move on to Indian news. So if you want to add something on this is just routine appointments, isn't it?
This it's very significant. It's a political appointment. January 6th, the Capitol riots, the select committee probe was declined unilaterally by the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans because they see a witch hunt that is going on. As usual, the House has used the majority to determine and vote in favor. Total 13-member chairmanship, and the 8 nominees of 8 will be for the Republicans, 8 will be for the Democrats, and Republicans can nominate 5. Even when Kevin McCarthy nominates 5, Nancy has the right to veto whether any of those 5 should be or should not be. So this is very much like a political drafting of the agenda that is in progress. So what comes out of it? Another political rhetoric. I just want to have one point before we transition to India. There's a very significant, this is the DHS secretaries in the deportation. Today, there is no deportation policy in the United States. For example, if you recall the Supreme Court, SCOTUS rule that you can indefinitely, if you choose to, you can indefinitely keep those people if that's what you want to do, but we are not going to take these cases into the Supreme Court and come up with policies. There's no policies. Okay, we are now running past 6 months. We have dismantled, but there's no policies as to how the illegal aliens are going to be dealt with and how the governance is going to take place. It's very astonishing that for a country of this size and this old that we don't have. So that's my observation on those 2 points, and then we can go to Indian news.
And in Indian news, 2 more drones were spotted over the Indian military area in Jammu and were driven away by the army. Indian Defense Minister clarifies that there was no sudden increase in troops on China border amid reports of escalation. India issues an ultimatum to European Union over vaccine passports. India will decline EU vaccinated citizens if Indian vaccines Covishield and Covaxin are not included in its list. India to implement one nation, one ration card scheme by July 31st per Supreme Court directive. There's a story on this in PGurus. You can read that to get more. 8 core sectors output rise in May by 16.8%, such as coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement, and electricity. The CEA, the Chief Economic Advisor of India, predicts near double-digit growth for fiscal year 2022. Looked at it together, what do you make of the economy, the progress of the economy under the current regime, and are things going to be more positive? Because today there's a lot of activity, chatter on Twitter that across the country, the prices of petrol have crossed 100 rupees a liter.
Okay, 2 things. One is the first question that you asked is economic indicators. There's a general consensus from various economists. I think we have covered this as to how the government has managed on the supply side. The various economists predict, including Moody's, World Bank, IMF, and now the CEA, plus the markets. They generally expect the economy to be around, anything between 9% to 10.5%. So on the GDP growth side, if you take the exports have grown. We talked about that. If you take a look at some of the core sectors, you can see month to month these core sectors have continued to rise. Of course, one can say relative to 2020, but the fact is that you need to do a comparative analysis as the economy comes back mainstream. Now, on the demand side, I think we talked about this. On the demand side, there probably requires much more inducement of what I call as the stimulus money. It's the stimulus money which is driving. So we need to see what they're going to do on the stimulus side. If you ask the government is going to state, I'm feeding 800 million people free. Okay, so over a period of till I think November, if I'm correct, that is the Garib Yojana program. And then they have stated we are giving everybody, we are vaccinating free. So there's a lot of measures that we are putting in. And our whole objective is through recapitalization program to infuse employment and then therefore create demand. But the opposite side of the view is that you need to do equal amount of heavy lifting on the demand side, and don't worry about the deficits. Everybody is in deficit, so therefore it's not going to shrink your balance sheet. Don't worry about the shrinking of the balance sheet. It's not going to be material in the overall context if you want to continue to sustain the momentum. This is the dialogue. If you ask me, I think I've covered this in my observations on the 7 years of as an external observer rather than someone who is living on ground and understanding the ground reality, as people would like to say. When I look at the macroeconomic parameters, they are doing everything which is consistent with what is required, except I would urge them to do something on the demand side of the stimulus.
And now let's take a look at markets. And in markets, stock futures are flat as second half of 2021 kicks off. The headline news here is that the stimulus that has driven the economy with low rates is now going to still continue to have its effect. Consumer confidence, better home sales augurs well as we step into the second half. It is the unspent dollars in consumer balance sheet close to $3 trillion that would further power the second half, and with it the corporate profits. JP Morgan forecasts EPS for 2021, that is earnings per share, to around $200 from 144 in 2020, and 2022 it is going to go up to $225, and it predicts that by 2023 the EPS is going to be around $245. Very, very impressive numbers. S&P, so your thoughts on this, and then we can wrap up this show.
The whole objective of sharing these numbers is to indicate, notwithstanding the fact there's a huge debt and deficit that is building up on the balance sheet of the government, you are beginning to see the macro indicators, in terms of the performance of the companies. Earnings per share is a reflection, it's an aggregate of the 500 companies in the Standard & Poor's index. It's a reflection that these earnings have seen a positive momentum since the COVID times, and it augurs well, based on three specific factors: continued stimulus, low interest rates, and to some extent inflation. This 2.4 to 3.2% inflation is also pushing the price, which indirectly is contributing to the overall value creation of these companies and their underlying profits. The honeymoon would start from somewhere around 2023, when interest rates are expected to climb up, when the Fed has indicated they don't see interest rate climbs. As it stands, no interest rate, and there will be 2 rates increases in 2023. That's the summary of the first set of data.
And S&P performance has been up 16.13%, Dow 12.73%, NASDAQ 12.54%, and the Brent crude now is at $74.67 a barrel, more pain at the pump. 10-year Treasury bond it's going from 0.93% to 1.45%. Bitcoin has been fluctuating between 28,383 to 34,979. So there's a lot of activity, especially in the digital currency sector. We are headed for some very interesting times. As you know, we're also now beginning to listen about more digital currencies coming online. So we'll wait and see how this plays out. Sridharji, as always, it was a pleasure listening to you on various topics around the world, sir. We'll be back again tomorrow, Friday. Thank God it's Friday. Namaskar.
Namaskar and have a good day.